The first thing you're going to do is make your cake level by cutting the dome off the top. You can use the pan as a guide, or if it's not as tall as the pan, you can take it out and cut the top off using a cake leveler, a ruler, and mark it, or you can just eyeball it like I do. Next, you need to cut the edges off of your cakes. This is important even if they're soft and not browned. You want the cake to be slightly smaller than the cake round that you'll be using as a guide. Then you will tort the cakes, meaning cutting them in half lengthwise. If your cakes are shorter than 2 inches, you'll have very short cake layers. This is okay if it's a look and taste that you're going for, but typically 1-inch tall cake layers work very well. You can use a cake leveler for this, the toothpick ruler trick, or simply get eye level with the cake and cut around as you spin the cake. Then choose a nice flat layer for the top of your cake. Place it on a cake circle that's at least the size of your cake. You will ice it, pushing the icing over the edges just a little. Using a turntable, spin the cake while holding your offset spatula at a 45-degree angle to the cake from the center outward. Make sure that the spatula is completely level with the top of your cake or it won't be even. Then you will place wax paper over that icing and smooth it with a fondant smoother. Then you'll place a cake circle on top of your wax paper, and then while sandwiching the top and bottom cake circles, quickly invert the entire sandwich. The top of your cake is now on the bottom with the wax paper between it and the cake circle. You will begin filling your cake and stacking each additional layer on. Take great care to make each one level and do just like you did on that top portion. When you get to the last layer, which is the bottom of your cake, you will put a thin coat of icing on it to attach the cake circle. Be sure all of the layers are even with each other and not offset. Then you will level your cake. Remove your cake from the turntable if it's not completely level and place your cake on the most level counter space. Using a small bubble level your cake by gently tilting the cake from the top. This will encourage the icing to flatten more in raised areas. Be very careful you do not push too hard, as this may break your cake layers or push out any filling that you've added. Next is crumb coating your cake. Be careful not to push your cake out of level or skew it. Place a thin coating of icing on your cake to seal in the crumbs. Then you'll scrape off the bulk of the icing so there will be enough room for the finished coat. You will see here that I did not cut off my edges to allow more of a space between the outside of my cake edge to the outside of the cake circle. Using a bench scraper, place the side edge flush with the large cake circle the cake is sitting on. You will be scraping off the icing really close to the actual cake, but it will undercut the cake circle just a little bit, versus in this clip I am using the cake circle and going flush with it because I did not cut off my edges. The next step is putting a final coat of icing on your cake. Put it on just like your crumb coat, though being careful not to get crumbs in the final coat. Using a bench scraper, place the side of the edge flush with the large cake circle that the cake is sitting on. Then, using the smaller cake circle as a guide, scrape off the icing to make it flush with the top of the small cake circle. This will take several passes. You'll be scraping off a lot of icing, but also adding more in areas that have low spots. Be sure to keep the bench scraper completely perpendicular to the cake board, or your cake will be wedge-shaped. You'll see here that I did not scrape the bench scraper against the white cake circle. That's because I did not cut off the edges of my cake, so I had to eyeball it, which is not ideal. If you're doing a naked cake, then you would not cut off your edges and you would still scrape it tight to the cake circle. You will then refrigerate your cake upside down as you have constructed it. When it's completely chilled and the icing is firm, you will invert the cake and peel off the wax paper. To invert it, sandwich both the upper and lower cake circles, holding tightly, and quickly invert your cake. This will take some skill and works best with a firm chilled cake. Then you remove the wax paper. And you may have a ledge that needs to be filled around the top of your cake, and you can just fill this simply by using your spatula with icing to fill in the areas and then scraping off the residual amounts. Then decorate your cake as you like. This inverted technique works very well when you must get level, even tiers for stacked cakes, or if you need a crisp edge that is perfect, or for just that smooth, professional look.